So I'm delighted to welcome you to another edition of the Business of AI podcast. And today I'm delighted to welcome Isabel Bathurst, who's the owner and co-founder of Legal AI. So Isabel, welcome to the podcast.
It's lovely to be here on the podcast, Tim. Good to see you today.
Yeah, great to see you too. And I'm really interested today to understand more about how you're using and advising people to use AI in the legal sector. But I wonder whether we could start off by you just giving us a bit of your background and how you got started doing what you're doing today with Legal AI.
Sure, very happy to do that. I'm a solicitor. I've been a solicitor for a number of years, so more than 20, in litigation, with a specific area of expertise in healthcare, personal injury, catastrophic injury, but the litigation process. And during that time and during my lifetime, I've been very privileged to see how technology has grown, developed, exploded in our world generally. Um, but I started out in geography back in the day, and I was at Manchester University with some of the first algorithms looking at geographical information systems. And so with the onset of AI, it's almost as though I've gone full circle back to where I started, looking at how data can be analysed well with intelligent automation. And if anyone is aware of what a geographical information system is, it's exactly that. It's the first algorithmic analysis of data to provide information to look at things like we were looking at how you placed doctors' surgeries, supermarkets, that kind of thing. And it's the first real use of how that data was looked at. So when it came to November 23, I think, and AI being a buzzword, I was like, well, I'm familiar with this. But how it became an intersection in the legal sector is that as a partner of a practice, we'd looked at purchasing case management systems. I'd looked at how we integrate AI into a law practice. I'd been involved throughout my career in implementing case management systems for the first time and looking at how you use those systems in the business of law. But what I'd found as time went on is whilst the systems were brilliant, they didn't always quite do what I needed them to do as a solicitor. And I felt happier when I'd got a pile of papers in front of me. I felt really that what happened with technology is they threw the paper at this computer and said, sort it out, without really analysing how we work well as solicitors and how our day to day happens. And I feel that I'm forever inputting passwords, trying to get into a system and actually getting in to do what I do. I think I get there somewhere further down the day rather than straight away. And I think I'd like to get back to doing what I know best.
Amazing. So it sounds like then you've been able to take your experience of grappling with bringing these technology solutions into law practices, and now you're helping other businesses to be able to understand how best to approach that question, how to select the best vendors, suppliers, technologies, and maybe how to tailor it to their needs. Is that right?
A little bit more than that, a little bit more exciting than that, actually. That's the very essence of my interest and how I came involved in technology in the legal sector. But with that interest and that spark, I was approached by an organisation that had developed and pioneered its own private AI tool. And it did not want to sell into the legal sector, a sector that it knew was a large sector, but one that it just wasn't familiar with. And wanted to partner with an organisation or those within the legal sector who were familiar with that sector to enable the tools to be properly implemented. And so that joint venture started 2 years ago with another company that had already started to grow and develop an AI tool. And so I took my understanding of what the systems were in place in the tech stack and thought, well, if we added in an AI tool and looked at all the issues relating to data, compliance, process, how we work in a law firm, we can integrate that AI into the legal sector in a very, very good way.
Yeah. So it's about then being able to understand what that day-to-day workflow looks like for a solicitor, and then understanding where the technology can fit in to solve some of those problems. And I wonder whether you can talk us through how you start to analyze that, right? Because it's probably quite yeah.
It's a huge question, but interestingly, in my later career, I became a consultant solicitor. So I also advised law firms on how they manage their staff, how they manage their lawyers, and I worked in a particular organisation advising on efficiencies, training individuals, but also working with the IT department on upgrading and implementing the case management system. And what I realised is that the IT people and the lawyers was using the same words and meaning completely different things in the context of what workflow meant. What I mean as a solicitor and what the IT people mean, they're just completely different things, and you're using the same words and thinking you're talking the same language, but you're completely across purposes. So I realised you need this whole glossary of terms to actually sort of explain what you mean. And to be fair to the case management companies, what they have to enable the solicitor to do what we do is fantastic, and it covers a number of different areas of work, from accounting to time recording to managing documents to managing a client account. And I think the complexity of the business of law means the complexity of the technology is where the difficulty arises. But the main problem was the systems not talking to one another. For example, if you've got a case management system that's outside Outlook and you're using Outlook for email, yes, you can copy and paste or the email save, but you really want to be able to have a search facility that's more fundamental. The technology has improved spectacularly since COVID. It's just that I'd like that little extra assistance on searching, putting data in the right place, and just being able to ask the systems to talk to one another, which is where the AI comes in. It's bridging a gap where on my day-to-day, the gap is a gulf. And certainly as a bit of a technophobe in many ways, I didn't grow up with a phone in my hand like some of the modern solicitors. It's not so intuitive to me. And that made me think about certain clients, is that when we're asking our clients to go onto a system and input information, are we really enabling those clients to work with us as solicitors as well as we can do? I used to sit down with a client or go and see them at home, especially vulnerable clients. And I thought, well, if I'm finding this a little bit of a challenge, what price more vulnerable client, a client who's busy, even, we say that people are vulnerable, just time deficiency can be a frustration on getting things done. And if there's a stumbling block or a reason to get into another system that stops you doing it, you'll find you put it off. And this creates inefficiencies in business. It means people don't proceed with cases. And I just thought there's a whole inertia in that way of operating for us all.
Yeah. Well, I found it really interesting when you were talking about the way in which you're using language differently, the same words, the same terms like workflow differently between what you mean in the legal sense and what the technologists mean. But I also thought it was really interesting to try and understand what a case means in this context as well, because you're obviously that's something which you do on a day-to-day basis as a solicitor. Could you help us understand what a case looks like and the complexity of the sort of materials you get there? Are they PDFs? Are they Word documents? Are they spreadsheets? What does that look like?
Everything, including handwritten, you name it, it comes in any format. And therein is the perfect illustration of the problem. Working within Microsoft and Outlook with Word documents and everything that fits in the Microsoft ecosystem suddenly gets challenging when you get a handwritten doctor's note from a bygone era and you've got to put that into the flow. And if I can explain how a case works, it's interesting. One of the challenges is if I've got a new client, all I have is a name, background to a case. I've got a blank sheet of paper from which I have to build a case. And from that, I collate the evidence relating to that case. So if it's involving, for example, clinical negligence, you do have a set of medical records. And we know medical records can be charts, diagrams, pictures, handwritten notes.
And doctors'
Um,
handwriting famously is not very good, right?
Fortunately, they have gone digital and they are made to input things, but they're not as straightforward. And everything being transmitted digitally, medical records are special category under the data protection, and there are extra challenges in relation to the data processing elements, the data storage elements of special records like medical notes and records. We work with experts, people external to the organisation. You've got to send that data in a coordinated way, an organised way to other people and stakeholders. You want to be able to potentially get it before a judge at the end and navigate it through, and everybody working from the same documents. It's challenging, and if you're working on multi-party type cases. So I've worked on cases like the PIP, breast implant litigation, the hip litigation, where you've got multitude, masses and masses of documents. That gets more challenging. And there are systems that enable document management. I mean, we used to do it manually. People can't believe I did that manually. But we did. It's now done with amazing technology, but the navigation of those documents is not as easy as it might otherwise be. And I think I'd be the first to say that some of the document management systems are looking to AI to facilitate the search facilities within those mass tort type cases of large volumes of documents, or disclosure, we call them as solicitors.
Yeah. So that's one of the areas which I suppose I can see how different types of AI have been beneficial, because they can deal with that complexity. And you say, people can't believe that in the olden days you'd go through and actually sort of manually read things and then process them and file them, etc. I suppose that would have always been paralegals, or at least the juniors within the teams who would have gone through and done some of that work. One of the big challenges across the AI sector is the impact that this is having on the entry level jobs. And I wonder whether that's something that you started to see, whether, are there risks as well as opportunities? And is this empowering some people as well?
There's a lot in that question, Tim. So I'll
Yeah.
get right to the heart of it, is what's happening to the young lawyers coming in, and are they able to learn the role of the solicitor well enough when the whole nature, basis upon which how they learn is changed fundamentally. Well, I work very much with students, and I'm accredited to provide apprenticeships, and have always worked with the junior members. Our students have got more ability in technology than we have if we're a little bit longer in the tooth. They grew up with technology, um, and they understand how the systems work. I think you'll find that some students coming in have got more knowledge of how the technology works than those of us that have been in the profession longer. And we need to really, for the first time, tap into a skill set that's better than those greybeards, if you like, further down the line. And what our challenge is to enable those younger solicitors to learn how we have gained our expertise, but to do that a fundamentally different way. And what I think it's opened up as a challenge is, rather than giving, you mentioned that document management, that document, I mean, for me as a solicitor, a qualified graduate out of university, I'd done, I'd been a research assistant. Being paid to go through masses of documents was an easy ride. It was dead easy. I'd gone through university and here I was sort of like, oh, let's have a It really is boring, and and doesn't exercise my grey matter in really that many ways. There's a lot of it that does, but you're searching for information in documents. It's interesting, it's a nice job, but it doesn't get me to properly analysing. It's only when you get to the finer detail and the final bits of the information, when you've done that process, that you start utilising the critical analysis and I needed for the case. Our students are better equipped now to be able to start that process sooner. And we need to give them that credit in both the skill set, and we need to train them better. We need to be working with them more closely, and be aware of the fact that they are well educated, well trained, with a skill set that we didn't have when we came out of university, if we're 45, 50 plus. And so I think we need to look at how we train, how we work alongside, and actually look at redefining the skill set and how they operate and how they work, and utilize those skills well.
Yeah, well, no, that's I like the sound of that, being able to really sort of pass on some of that sort of knowledge to the next generation in a sort of faster, augmented way, if you like, that they're now able to get there quicker, and the skills that they need are slightly more critical than some of the ones which maybe you would have started off when you were going through and sifting through all that
Well,
paperwork.
to be fair, when I was training, I was very fortunate in that I always sat in the solicitor partner's office, and that was invaluable. I think as time's gone on, our paralegals are a bit more removed from the solicitor, and certainly over COVID, you're not sitting in the room alongside. And I think, from my perspective, the students, solicitors, trainees, and paralegals that I've worked with very closely are very able to pick up more readily the tasks that I would want them to do, that are actually what I would define as legal tasks rather than grunt work. I think that a paralegal has become to do. And back in the day, we always used to be put on a photocopier, which is one of the things that we were always put on. If you remember those days, I just think we can train better and work alongside very capable young individuals who come to the table with a whole capable set of skills that we didn't have, and we redefine their skill set, their role, and recognize the capability that we've got before us.
Yeah. Well, another topic I wanted to kind of cover off with you was around security. And you talking about building some of these workflows where you're bringing in huge amounts of data, documents, and then you're kind of processing that, and then that's going through the various stages that you need to analyze and access and retrieve. And there are risks in there, and you've already mentioned some of the sensitive data as well, which is in there. So, how have you managed security, and what are the risks, and how are you continuing to manage them? Because I imagine it's an ongoing process.
It's the very heart of the issues, to be fair. And my children said to me, "Oh, Mum, AI is the internet." And I sort of looked at them and I thought, well, no, that's what we've come to understand it to be. AI is intelligent automation. And so what I have is a tool that is private AI that utilizes ChatGPT, OpenAI, when you require it to look at public data. It's capable of looking at private data privately. And that's the issue, especially in the legal sector. It has to have, it has to be private. That's the thing that we've really missed in the euphoria of what is AI. Um, and AI always, before the internet, it existed pre-internet, as far as I can, or more or less the same time. And so it's become utilized on the internet by large organizations that are just shouting louder. And so if you are able to make it private in a legal firm, those issues of compliance become less of an issue. You want to be able to go into the uh, into the internet to search where appropriate, but you want to set what's in a technical term guardrails. So in the legal sector, we have guardrails in what in who can do what. Who can conduct litigation, for example, has to be a solicitor or an authorized person. And the same goes for what an AI tool can do within the legal sector, especially where you've got sensitive data, data that you are in control of, data that you process, and that you are responsible for on behalf of others. You've got to know how that data is processed. And I think that is the fundamental issue that we're faced with, where AI is in the world generally presently.
Yeah. I'd love to know a little bit more about how you approach that sort of problem of security and privacy, because you're right. A lot of the foundational models are out there. That's what most people think when you talk about AI, but actually
Mm.
that's only a part of what most companies are really using. And obviously, you're using things like visual recognition and prediction and data modeling to be able to kind of build your workflow. But just on a
Exactly.
security perspective, how did you sort of start to build that private AI, if you like, that private sort of model. I imagine you're using a bit of retrieval, augmented generation, those types of models as well. But can you tell us a little bit about how you've developed that privacy and security?
I think that would have to be dealt with by our technology team who have devised and built the AI tool itself. But it's because it's separate and distinct from OpenAI, it's its own intelligent automation, it's its own tool. So it's a distinct AI tool that does intelligent automation and data processing. And because it's its own tool, it only utilizes OpenAI. I think it's hosted still on Microsoft, but on Azure. But it's its own integral data automotive system.
Yeah, got it. And I think that is the key thing here, isn't it? That it's about being able to create partitions for where your data sits with all your case information in, making sure that's partitioned away from everything else which goes into the foundation model, and making sure that there's no sort of leakage into that model.
I think that's exactly right. And partition is that you've got to be careful because partition, it's got to be an absolute iron gate, I think.
Yeah.
And that's the really interesting part of this. That's where I think a lot of the issues arise, is that when you look at what OpenAI does, it's looking at all data that's available, regardless of what of whether that data has been checked and analysed and made to be correct. There's a lot of data that's in what we have become aware of as the internet that is just data. We don't know whether it's accurate or not. Whereas if you have your own data, you're taking it from data sources that you know are accurate, but you want to make sure that you don't leak it. So the guardrail has to be, as I say, an iron door.
Yeah. Yeah,
You've
no,
got to be in control of that, and that's where your settings and your system has to be robust.
yeah, absolutely. And that's, I think, the critical thing is making sure that you can benefit from those foundational models without leaking data into those foundational models. And that's where the kind of like the private instance of being able to access those comes in. Well, that's great. So as you look forward then, and to think about some of the projects or some of the what the next year holds, what are the areas where you're excited that AI is going to be able to accelerate or augment what you're able to do?
I think with lawyers, they're very fearful, and I think they've got the right questions and the right concerns about utilising AI. Um, what we have is a whole set of tools and a platform, which is almost, in terms of selling a product, almost impossible. So, what we've set out to do is build use cases within the legal sector that make sense to the legal profession and showcase how utilising AI well can make their systems work well. And one of the areas I've looked at is just taking discrete elements of the work process. And if you are understanding in relation to how AI works with an API, it can plug into any other system. If you take a discrete process and enable that process in the background, it can show lawyers safely what it can do. So take medical records, sorting medical records, preparing a chronology and a summary, and then being able to search and interrogate that is a distinct area. I know Oracle are doing that in the States, but I think what our capability is that we're able to showcase that quite well. But one area that I really identified as well, two areas where solicitors across the board, regardless of whether you're a sole practitioner or at the top magic circle firm, one of the things that solicitors are required to do by government is to onboard clients well with a client account with checks similar to banking, with anti-money laundering, proper IDs, and a risk assessment. And that whole process is there's a number of different tools that do that already. But as a solicitor, I would say that there's several tools that do the same job, and there's several tools that do the whole process, and not one that integrates, and not one that puts all the information in one place and gets me to being able to do a case ready without going through a process. And it's that process that we've mapped out to just showcase the tip of the iceberg of the capability of the AI tool.
Fantastic. Well, just to kind of wrap things up then, as well, can you tell us how we can find out more about legal AI and how we can stay in touch and follow the developments as they progress?
Yes, we're on legalai.it.com as our website. It's just a new website about to be launched. So give me the next 7 days and it'll be a newly launched website to showcase all that we do with some information videos and a sheet explaining the background and the tool itself. I'm on LinkedIn with the same profile, and there's obviously details with a email with an inquiry form, and we work alongside resellers and advisors and implementers who actually advise law firms, law businesses, and those selling into law how these tools can be utilised well. So just give us a call, follow us on LinkedIn, and just look on the website.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Isabel. It's been really interesting to hear about how you're using AI within the legal sector, and we've covered quite a bit of ground. But I find it particularly fascinating to hear about that particular issue around security and the risks there, but also how the tools you're building or that you built are accelerating the capabilities to deal with the complexity of that casework. But also thinking about how that changes the skills for graduates coming in, not necessarily replacing them, but allowing them to focus on the more intellectually stimulating part of being a solicitor as well. So lots to take away from this. And thank you very much for joining us today.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for your time, Tim. It's been a great session. Thank you.